This is the talk of the day. And you know, I cannot challenge you to tell your stories and then shy away from telling my own stories. So I'm going to talk about my art and my art, a little bit about my art background. When I think of my art from my childhood, I learned from my grandmother, who was a very excellent and skillful potter, basket maker. She made mats and she did patterns on her clay pots. And I also learned from my mother, who taught herself to design dresses. And at the time, she challenged her dad to actually use the treadmill, which is an industrial sewing machine. So now when I look back, I can tell that the apple doesn't fall very far away from the tree. So I took some of those skills from the women in my life, and even my grandmother on my father's side. She was also a very skillful person, very skillful farmer, and both my grandmothers were very skillful farmers, and they were excellent storytellers. So I can trace back my storytelling skills from my family and from my grandmothers, from my great aunties, who were also great speakers and very influential and people of influence in their communities, in their own way. So when I made a decision that I was going to be an artist, a number of mentors were helping me and were pushing me to do the best that I could. And I remember when it was time for me to move to a higher level other than just teaching myself, to prepare myself to compete at a national level, I wanted to go to an academic school. And it took me 5 years to apply to be actually accepted in this particular school. There were two forces that were against me. The first thing was I was a woman, and then I was a woman of color trying to go into a white school. And at that time, black children and black artists were just teaching themselves skills, and even sculptors were just learning by observation and not academically. So we had that challenge when we were growing up, that we had to learn to teach ourselves, because there wasn't that academic access for us to learn art. I remember in 1992 or 1991, when I set for O-level art as a subject in it's a subject in high school, but the high school that I went to was not offering art to black kids. So I had to do an extra class and just sit for that particular class. And I remember sitting in that room, and I was the only female in that room. And I was in that room with people that I already knew had names, that they were already exhibiting. And I knew most of these men because I would attend a life drawing class at the National Art Gallery with the Visual Artists Association in Bulawayo at the National Art Gallery. And so I knew them. I knew they were great artists. And I was the only female in that room. And I sat there and executed my drawings, and I was just trying to do the best that I could do. And I just was determined to use all my time. And when the results came, most of the men had C's because they were already artists. They were probably overconfident. And a few of them had B's. And in that group that set for art that year, I was the only student that scored an A. That gave me confidence because I was able to say, if these guys who are already artists can score C's and I can score an A, then I can stand toe to toe with them. The journey was not easy because it also meant that when I started working, I was working with men. And I remember when they hired me, there was one woman that was in the studio and I was replacing her. So that meant I was going to remain being the only one in the studio. And then I also got her position as the originator and then became the chief artist. And I remember being so grateful when they hired one of my schoolmates who was also female. And so that made two of us. And this was our story. And the person that strengthened me at the time when I went to art school, and I went for an internship in attachment, if you are in Zimbabwe or in other African nations, we don't quite call it an internship, we call it an attachment. So when I went for an attachment with Auntie Philo at the Natural History Museum in Zimbabwe, I actually realized, oh my gosh, she's the only female and she's the head of department, but she's also the only female working. So when that pattern kept on happening at the jobs that I was working, I began to be confident to be the only female in the room, the only female artist in the room. And my biggest challenge was to have skills that were not inferior to men. So I always had to push myself to make my hand an excellent hand, to also have a style that is uniquely my own style. Even as an originator, as a textile designer originator, and as a chief artist, I always had that sense of making my designs authentic, and I was also working so much on ethnic designs because I also wanted that space to honor us as a people with ethnic designs. And at the time, we were also doing ranges which were for safaris, which was a good thing because most of the safaris were using ethnic designs. And I remember the first design that I made was very impressive, and that was the design that got me the promotion to become the chief artist. So in my career as an artist, I have learned to be a voice, to be authentic, to be myself, to not shy away from the field of art, because we still have more men than female artists. I mean, things keep on changing, but we need more women. So if you are listening to my story and you have a daughter, you have a niece that wants to be an artist, encourage them to be those kind of voices, to be those kind of women that can represent us in those spaces. So the way I became an artist is I taught myself at home first, and then I had to find a school to learn art academically. Then after learning art academically, then I was able to use my art to get a job as a textile designer. And at the same time, I was working as a textile designer, and I was also working as an artist, exhibiting in different exhibitions in different art galleries. And talk of a life that was busy. It was a busy life, and I was also doing other things. And as a young person, I was also a youth leader, so I was doing everything. I was involved in many activities, but those activities also enriched me as an artist. So this is my artistic story. That's a short version of it. I have done the challenge. Keep on doing the challenge, guys, in this month of March.